Go. All right. Good morning. This is week 11 and we're talking about transfer pricing decentralization this week. It's really interesting. We've come a long way in this section of Management Accounting 2 where we've spoken a lot about balanced scorecard. We've talked a lot about the financial measures, non-financial measures in the balanced scorecard. Now we're getting to the stage of the semester where we're looking at more traditional forms of control that are especially used in large organizations. And one particular critical thing about a large organization is the knowledge transfer costs and the control costs. And these two costs come together to force organizations to come up with an optimum structure, a structure that tries to balance the knowledge transfer costs and control costs, while at the same time giving managers autonomy to make decisions using their information for the benefit of the organization. So, that's a general dilemma for large organizations, dealing with knowledge transfer costs and control costs. Now, if we look at the structure for today's lecture, we're going to look at four main learning objectives. There are 7 learning objectives to be covered, but we'll just focus on the first 4 in this preview of the lecture. That is, we're going to look at what a management control system is, decentralization, transfer pricing, and setting transfer prices. Now, when we talk about management control systems, they are basically the formal and informal mechanisms in the organization to help the organization achieve its objectives. And generally we can break down the role of those mechanisms in 2 ways. One is in terms of controlling or influencing the people in the organization so that they are aligned with the organization's objective. The other is to help provide information that helps facilitating decisions in the organization. So you have an influencing role, you have a facilitating role, a little bit broader aspect of what management control is about. Ultimately, we have an acronym called GOALS. And really, the management accounting system, looking at management control systems even broader, we're interested in on-time information, accuracy, on-time decision-making, accuracy, and learning over time. These 3 things come together to help shape goal congruence, to help improve selection decisions in the organization. That is, any decision that managers make. So when we ask what is a management control system, it's probably a part of, we're talking about the formal and the informal mechanisms that help focus on controlling behavior in the organization. But ultimately a good control system would want to extend to help facilitate decisions in the organization, but control is control first and foremost. So that's what we mean by a management control system. So an example of a formal control system are rules and procedures, things that people are allowed to do, not to do, in order to do well in the organization. You put locks on doors, that is a formal physical control over what behavior is allowed, not allowed in the organization. There's also informal type controls, and we talk about that, such as socialization mechanisms, training, anything that helps groom the mindset of the people that work in the organization so that they become aligned with the organization's objectives and more productive, hopefully, at the same time. So that's what we mean by management control system. We're introducing that at the start of the lecture. Next, we're going to talk about decentralization. And what, as I said at the outset, large organizations have to deal with knowledge transfer costs and 2, control costs. And knowledge transfer costs are created by the competitive environment. They're created by environmental uncertainty. They're created by the fact that organizations have a range of products, they have a range of customers, so that people at the front line, that is those that are dealing with customers, are likely in most cases going to have more and faster information about what is working, what is not working, what customers are happy, what customers are not happy. and they're going to find out faster, they're going to find out richer information than senior management who are not on the front line. And senior management don't have time to deal with the individual issues every minute of the day. So you have these knowledge transfer costs, that is, you've got this information asymmetry between those that are on the front line and senior management. And it's nearly impossible for senior management to fully understand or fully aggregate all that information to make proper decisions. So we need to delegate decisions to people on the front line so they can show that the organisation is more effective, say, in responding to customer demands or different product requirements or service standards associated with the products. So we're all going to look at the control costs too. Control costs always is a feature of decentralisation too, because with control costs we're interested in the people on the front line or agents not really behaving in accordance with what senior management want the frontline people to behave. So the frontline people may give a discount to the customer quietly without it being recorded, and it may not be in the best interest of the company to have these different discounts being given out, and customers may see variation in that service and may not see it as a positive experience. So you may want to control against the amount of discounting that is given by people on the front line, so you may want to control that, and so you may want to restrict such decisions like that. And we're going to talk about some of those examples in the lecture today. Control costs are things like people doing the wrong thing when you're not able to observe their behaviour, or making the wrong decisions based on information that they're able to get that you do not have. And so sometimes you want people to make good decisions with that information without you having to compile it and take all the information yourself as a senior manager, but at the same time, by giving them the autonomy to make decisions, they may make decisions that work against the long-term objectives of the organisation. So we'll talk about a few of those examples in today's lecture. So there is a trade-off between knowledge transfer costs and control costs. Knowledge transfer costs cause a lot of information overload with senior people in the organisation. In order to reduce that information overload, we want to decentralise and give people on the front line more autonomy to do things on behalf of the organisation. At that same time, then you're creating control costs, because then they can become out of control and do things behind your back, so to speak. So we've always got this trade-off between knowledge transfer costs and control costs. That's the big issue associated with decentralisation. And over the next 2 weeks, we're going to look at the various aspects of decentralisation, and that really goes down to, if we go over to next week, we're going to look at measurement, and then we're going to look at rewards. And it's a kind of 1, 2, 3 decentralisation, measurement and rewards is likened to a three-legged stool. And the notion is that with the three-legged stool, if you take away one leg, the stool will fall over. In order to balance the stool properly, you need properly aligned decentralisation, measurement that is properly aligned with the decentralisation, and the rewards that are aligned with the measurement and decentralisation. So next week we're going to talk more about measurement and rewards, but for this week we really want to understand the importance of decentralisation, the costs of decentralising, the benefits of decentralising. And that takes us to the learning objective 3 in our lecture. With decentralisation comes the opportunity to use transfer pricing, especially in large organisations between various divisions, especially if there's a manufacturing division and there's a supplying division and they're both under the same organisation. And so it may be you use transfer pricing mechanisms to guide the behavior of those divisions and how they interact with each other. You can make it market-based, so therefore the two divisions will interact just like they're in the marketplace. Or you can make it a bit more controlled and structured and use transfer prices such as cost-based transfer prices or negotiated transfer prices. So we do talk about that in terms of the types of transfer prices under Learning Objective 4. That is, the types. There are market-based transfer prices, cost-based transfer prices, and negotiated transfer prices. We will also talk about, in Learning Objective 3, the criteria that we need to think about. That is, criteria in setting transfer prices. That is the theory, it's the reason or the role that transfer pricing serves in the organisation. So our first and foremost role of transfer price is to try and simulate a market environment. That is, try and get two divisions to collaborate together as if they were two independent market bodies out in the free market, and they're interacting with each other. One is providing value to the other one is paying for that value. And that's a kind of a starting point for setting a market-based transfer price. Now that generally works when there are avoidable distribution costs to be had, also if there's excess capacity. And that works, why? Because when there's excess capacity, it pays for one of the divisions to use that capacity in supplying another division. When there's avoidable distribution costs, it pays the selling division to buy in-house than to buy outside, or to sell in-house rather than to sell outside. Why? Because then they can avoid their distribution costs. So market-based transfer pricing will work very nicely when you've got these two scenarios. That is, if you can avoid distribution costs, or if one of the divisions has excess capacity. You definitely do not have opportunity costs associated with those transfers between divisions in the organisation. So in today's lecture, we'll look at some examples, an example of avoidable distribution costs and an example of excess capacity. So just coming near to the end of this preview, so we're talking about transfer pricing criteria, setting transfer prices, market-based, cost-based, negotiated transfer prices, and also we've got the transfer pricing criteria. Just to remind you, we're looking at the roles that transfer pricing plays. And there are 3 roles, some textbooks say 4 roles of transfer pricing. There's goal congruence, to achieve goal congruence, to enhance motivation, to support performance evaluation, and also to create autonomy. Ultimately, you want divisions to have autonomy. In some sense, they gain motivation by having autonomy. If you have autonomy and freedom, it's more likely you're going to be motivated to be doing something. The problem is that will you be motivated to doing things that is congruent with the goals of the organisation? So it's nice to have autonomy, but not at the cost of goal congruence. It's nice to have rigid rules for how transfer prices should be set, but maybe not at the cost of autonomy, if it reduces, especially if it reduces motivation. All right, so it really depends. So for some organizations, the role of transfer pricing may be to focus on goal congruence and hopefully try and achieve autonomy, and at the same time performance evaluation. If you can achieve all of those 3, you're naturally going to have motivation. It may not be possible to achieve all 3. You may want to just focus on 2 of those objectives and give up the 3rd and the 4th. So we're going to talk about these roles of transfer pricing in today's lecture, and it's very important to understand that. Just to go over that again, if we're trying to get the goal congruence role right, we're interested in divisions taking actions for the benefit of the firm as a whole. Whereas for the performance evaluation role, we're interested in evaluating, rewarding performance based on actions of divisions that are Pareto optimal. So an action by a division to use its excess capacity to help another division is an example of Pareto optimal. That is, they're doing something for the other division but not at the cost of the firm as a whole. They're using up excess capacity and another division is benefiting. So that's a Pareto optimal example. And finally, decision freedom. As I said earlier, you give freedom to departments, of course they're going to be naturally motivated. Problem may be in the control costs associated with that freedom. So these are the issues you need to think about when we're setting transfer pricing, and we're going to talk about that in today's lecture. There are 3 more learning objectives, and they're a little bit more detailed with respect to cost-based, negotiator-based transfer pricing, and so they're also important. We'll cover them in today's lecture. So there we have it. Management control systems in the organisation, decentralization, starting to talk about the 3-legged stool, that is decentralization, measurement and rewards, and finally transfer pricing, and especially what is the basis for using transfer prices. It's really important to understand why you're using transfer pricing. So that, hope to see you in the lecture, and thank you for listening. Bye.